Program will not be seen due to the following special presentation.
Hello, I'm Doug White, and welcome to NBC10 Biographies. We all enjoy a scary story, and perhaps that is why the two individuals we will meet in this episode are so popular. But one dealt in fiction, and the other was charged with a very real crime. People are familiar with the name Lizzie Borden, but not many realize that she was found not guilty of murdering her parents. H.P. Lovecraft was responsible for several gruesome murders, but they all took place within the pages of the books he authored. We begin this edition of NBC10 Biographies with Lizzie Borden.
Lizzie Borden took an axe, she gave her mother 40 whacks, and when she saw what she had done, she gave her father 41. Lizzie Borden took an
On August 4th, 1892, in Fall River, Massachusetts, Andrew Borden and his wife Abby were brutally murdered. Their deaths were caused by a vicious attack with a sharp, heavy weapon such as an axe or hatchet. Mr. Borden's daughter, Lizzie, was accused of both murders. Today, the home of the Borden family is a museum and a popular bed and breakfast. Visitors from around the world come to examine the scene of the most famous crime of the 19th century. Andrew Borden was a wealthy, self-made man. In 1845, he married a farm girl, Sarah Morse. Their first daughter was Emma. Their second child died in infancy. Lizzie Borden was born in 1860. Her mother passed away when she was just 2 years old. Her father remarried to Abby Gray, the spinster daughter of a local family. Most of the wealthy residents of Fall River built their homes in a region known as the Hill. Here they could live their lives in a manner befitting their place in society. But despite his wealth, Andrew Borden chose a modest house close to the downtown area.
Andrew Borden certainly was living a lifestyle well below his means. A man with a $250,000 fortune could have lived on a far grander scale than he chose to.
Unlike the homes of other successful businessmen, the Bordens did not have gas lights or modern inventions like the telephone.
His decision, that is Andrew Borden's decision to live where he did and the lifestyle that he did, affected his daughter's future. She's in a neighborhood where there are single men, but I doubt very much whether she would have accepted any of them.
On the morning of the murders, 5 people began their day at the residence on 2nd Street. Andrew Borden and his wife Abby. Bridget Sullivan, an Irish housemaid who had been working for the Bordens for about 3 years. John Morse, Andrew's brother-in-law, who was visiting the family. And Lizzie Borden. Her sister Emma was out of town staying with friends. Lizzie ate alone. After finishing her breakfast, she ironed handkerchiefs. John Morse had left the house to see relatives across town. Bridget Sullivan was instructed to wash the windows, both inside and out, by Abby Borden. Abby climbed the front stairs and began cleaning the guest room where John Morse had slept the night before. Andrew Borden was retired but still had considerable investments to oversee. He went downtown to attend to business matters. Between 9 and 9:30 that morning, someone entered the guest room and attacked Abby Borden. 18 blows to the head from a sharp instrument were the cause of death. Shortly before 11 a.m., Andrew Borden returned home. Bridget Sullivan unlocked the front door and let him into the house. Bridget went up the back stairs to lay down and rest a while. Mr. Borden made his way to the sitting room. According to Lizzie, she helped him take off his shoes and he relaxed on the couch. Lizzie claimed she then went out to the barn. Later, she gave various reasons for doing so to the police. As he rested on the couch, someone struck Andrew Borden 10 times in the head with a sharp instrument. At approximately 11:15, Lizzie Borden shouted up the stairwell to Bridget, "Come down quick, Father's dead. Someone came in and killed him." The police were called, but many officers were attending the annual outing at Rocky Point. The house was searched. Police could find no signs of forced entry or robbery. The brutal nature of the killings convinced them that these were not conventional homicides. The police asked Lizzie if she knew anyone who might have killed her mother and father. "She is not my mother, sir," Lizzie responded. "She is my stepmother. My mother died when I was a child."
When we return, the trial of Lizzie Borden on NBC10 Biographies.
2 days after the brutal murders of her father and stepmother, Lizzie Borden was informed that she was a suspect. "I am ready to go now," she replied, but the police did not take her into custody.
Fall River in 1892 was not Fall River today. The police in Fall River were used to arresting drunks and prostitutes. Things like this didn't happen in Fall River, and certainly not in a Borden household.
The police at the crime scene did not find blood on Lizzie's hands or clothing. But the day after being named as a suspect, Lizzie burned a dress that she claimed was ruined by paint stains.
She said that. That doesn't make it true. Do I think that was the dress? Yes. Remember, they didn't search Lizzie Borden. They didn't ask her to take her clothing off. They didn't frisk her as we do today. None of that.
An inquest was held at the Fall River Central Police Station. Under questioning by the district attorney, Lizzie gave somewhat confused and contradictory testimony. On August 11, 1892, 1 week after the murders, Lizzie Borden was arrested and charged with the crime. She was taken to a jail in Taunton, the nearest town with facilities for women prisoners. Rumors, gossip, and arguments over her guilt or innocence swept across the city of Fall River.
Of course, at that time, it would have made sense to most New Englanders, to these old Yankees, that the only person who could do something like this would have to be one of two things: a maniacal person, a madman, or an immigrant.
Controversy over who committed the crime continues to this day.
People believe she hired someone. Well, if she hired someone, why would she stay in the house? She'd go downtown and make sure somebody had seen her. Why stay there?
Mr. Morse typically slept up in the attic. So why the night before the murders was he sleeping in the guest room where Mrs. Borden's body was found the next morning? Who would Mrs. Borden not have been surprised to have seen that morning in the guest room? But the person who had spent the night there previously, which was John Morse. Actually, I'm surprised that more people have not written more about him possibly being involved in more.
Those who embrace the lesbian affair theory feel that it's due to being caught having an affair, physical affair, with the maid, and that caused Lizzie to leap up in a lesbian rage, kill her stepmother, and then wait for an hour and a half, and still in this supposedly typical lesbian rage, kill her father. You hear the sarcasm in my voice, and it's deliberate because I think it's ridiculous.
Lizzie Borden's trial opened at the New Bedford Courthouse on June 5th, 1893.
And this was the O.J. Simpson trial of the 19th century.
The prosecution claimed that Lizzie had killed her stepmother after years of smoldering hatred, and that she had silenced her father because he would have realized that she was the murderer. But the defense argued that there was no blood found on Lizzie's clothing, and they challenged the all-male jury to imagine a proper lady like Lizzie Borden committing such atrocities.
And the defense attorney made sure that he likened Lizzie Borden to their own wives, their own daughters, to drive that point home.
Most of these men had one thing in common. They had daughters or sisters or maiden aunts living at home unmarried. And the idea that their own kin could turn on them in such a vicious manner, it was not done.
It only took the jury an hour to return with a verdict. It was their unanimous conclusion that Lizzie Borden was not guilty. No one else was ever charged with the murders of Abby and Andrew Borden. Speculation about the identity and motive of the killer has continued for over 100 years.
I think that all of us, if we dig deep and we're honest about it, can remember times when we have said about our own parents, I hate her. I wish she was dead. You know, I could kill her. I hate her so much, or him so much. But we don't act on those feelings. And Lizzie Borden, if she's guilty, did. And I think that is the fascination.
A jury had found Lizzie Borden not guilty, but the people of Fall River seemed inclined to render a harsher verdict.
There was a very strict code of ethics. There was a code of rules that you lived by, never published, of course, but you knew what was done and what was not done. And certainly being involved in murder was not done.
Using the money she inherited from her father, Lizzie purchased a luxurious home with maids and a chauffeur. But she was shunned by most of society. She died in 1927 and was buried in the family plot at Oak Grove Cemetery, the final resting place of her father and stepmother. Despite the death of all the key players, the Borden mystery seems to have taken on a life of its own.
The Strange Life of H.P. Lovecraft, next on NBC10 Biographies.
I am Providence.
Howard Phillips Lovecraft was born in Providence, Rhode Island on August 20th, 1890. His father suffered a nervous breakdown and was committed to Butler Hospital in 1893. He died there 5 years later.
The father may have been the origin of some of these monsters that Lovecraft creates in his own fiction, patriarchal kinds of figures that return and haunt the younger species of the cosmos, which are human beings themselves.
Lovecraft's mother had hoped for a daughter and refused to cut the boy's long curls until he reached the age of 6.
She also told people he had a horrible face and that he was very ugly and that it wasn't a good thing for him to go out in public. At the same time, she did indulge him and cater to him, so it was a strange kind of love-hate relationship.
When the United States entered World War I, Lovecraft was anxious to join the fight, but his family quickly intervened.
One of his aunts, with whom he was living at the time, ran up brandishing his health certificate, which said he was really too frail to enlist, and that saved him from the conflict.
With no father to support the dwindling family fortune, H.P. Lovecraft had to find a way to bring money into the household.
He did it by ghostwriting, essentially, and he wrote pieces for other people. He edited other people's works. And most famously, he wrote a number of pieces for the great magician Harry Houdini.
Lovecraft struggled to have his own work published. He found the perfect outlet for his finely crafted stories of the supernatural in a pulp fiction magazine called Weird Tales.
He creates a universe in which human beings only play a minor role and are often the victims of gigantic, implacable alien forces. He makes you rethink your whole attitude about the world and its gods and how it works. And as a result, his stories are disturbing in a way that almost no one else's fiction ever has been. Lovecraft could describe a laundromat and make it sound like the vestibule of hell.
The flames devoured the volumes greedily, leaping up in strange colors and emitting indescribably hideous odors as the strangely hieroglyphed leaves and wormy bindings succumbed to the devastating elements. The Evil Clergyman by H.P. Lovecraft.
Although he wrote thousands of letters to friends and fellow writers, Lovecraft was a shy man with few close relationships. One exception was C.M. Eddy, author of The Loved Dead. Eddie's daughter remembers the night a tall, mysterious stranger appeared at their door asking to see her father.
And that's when I saw him for the first time. And when he came in the house, he was a tall, tall man. I was a little girl. I think I was about 5 or 6 years old.
Lovecraft and Eddie began a friendship based on mutual trust and encouragement.
when Lovecraft and my father used to read over each other's manuscripts, they didn't take anything from each other's manuscripts. And then my mother typed some of the manuscripts on her typewriter right there. So that was family, you know.
At night, the two writers took long walks through the streets of Providence, exploring back alleys and hidden avenues.
Well, when he heard about Poe Street, Edgar Allan Poe was his favorite writer, and he was amended about going down to see Poe Street. So they went walking down to Poe Street in the middle of the night and took in all of the different feelings that they got and wrote stories about him. Have you read any of his stories? Well, then you can probably guess where they walked to.
In November of 1923, Lovecraft and Eddie embarked on a search for the legendary Dark Swamp, thought to exist in Chepachet. It was the perfect expedition for a man with Lovecraft's vivid imagination. When his mother died, Lovecraft continued to live in Providence with his two aunts. After a brief courtship, he married Sonia Green in 1924. The new Mr. and Mrs. Lovecraft took an apartment in New York City. The move from his beloved Providence unleashed a flood of inner demons that inhabited the darker corners of the artist's soul. His letters were filled with racist and bigoted tirades aimed at the immigrants who sought new lives on Manhattan Island.
Heaven knows enough harm has already been done by the admission of limitless hordes of the ignorant, superstitious, and biologically inferior scum. Either stow them out of sight or kill them off. Anything so that a white man may walk along the streets without shuddering and nausea.
The curious thing is that while Lovecraft in his letters often worked himself up into a frothing frenzy over this, that he actually seemed in real life to be, and in his personal relations, to be quite tolerant. Once he got to know someone, even though they seemed to fall beyond the pale as he thought of it, he would eventually develop sometimes a very warm relationship with that person.
The marriage to Sonia Green did not last. Lovecraft returned to his beloved Providence. He continued his struggle to gain recognition as a writer, but with little success.
Other than the readership of Weird Tales and one or two other magazines, Lovecraft was virtually unknown.
On May 4th, 1936, Rhode Island celebrated the 300th anniversary of its declaration of independence from England. Lovecraft, a confirmed Anglophile, observed the celebration with mixed emotions.
The costuming was so good and the addresses so well delivered that one might well imagine that the years have dissolved away. It was all I could do to keep from crying down the rebel proposers of treason. They chanted, "God save the United Colonies," but I murmured the rightful syllables, "God save the King."
Within a year of this event, Howard Phillips Lovecraft was diagnosed with cancer. He never overcame the feeling that his life had been a failure. He died on March 15th, 1937.
Today, Lovecraft is known by millions, and he is known around the world. His stories have been translated into practically every European language, and as well as into Asia and other parts of the world. There is a large Lovecraft cult, as you might call it, people who are fascinated by his fiction, by his mythology. They come here, many of them several times a year. They visit his grave and gather together and talk and exchange their devotion.
And I welcome you to our service of tribute to the master of the macabre, Providence's native son, H.P. Lovecraft.
He connects us with a world of dark primal mythology, and that has had a tremendous impact on the way supernatural fiction has been written. After Lovecraft, it is not just ghosts and vampires and werewolves. After Lovecraft, it is monsters that tear apart the whole fabric of the universe.
In 1997, evidence of an attempt to dig up Lovecraft's grave was discovered at its resting place in the Swan Point Cemetery. Officials there assured the press that the writer's coffin was safely enclosed in a concrete liner. But an examination of Lovecraft's burial expenses reveals that only a pine case protected the casket. Graffiti was found on a nearby headstone.
That is not dead which can eternal lie, and with strange eon even death may die.
NBC10 Biographies will be right back after these messages.
Thank you for being with us. I'm Doug White, and be sure to join us next time for another edition of NBC10 Biographies.